Otherwise, Windows will not pick up the hard drive. Holy f***. I've never had a V6 card which shook the f***ing house. Oh my god. My apologies for the air conditioner running in the background, but it's just what you're going to have to live with. But as these videos always start out with, well, good day folks, Jordan here. We're going to explore my workstation, my new one here, in more detail since I felt the live stream didn't do it justice. So I've taken the live stream down, as you could probably already tell on my YouTube channel before making this video. So we're going to explore the system in a little bit better quality here on a video rather than a live stream, just because I feel it deserves justice in that respect. So this is my new workstation. It is a Dell Precision T3600, probably from 2011 or 2012. This would have been a high-end workstation from its day, back in the days of Sandy Ridge. So this has an Intel Xeon E5 2670 CPU in it, the 8-core 16-thread version, not the 10-core 20-thread, the version 2 I believe it was. This has the Sandy Bridge-based version of that chip, which is only an 8-core 16-thread. So if you ever look up the CPU online, do not confuse it for the 10-core version. Now, compared it to my workstation, it's very similar on the back. There's just USB ports, PS2, audio, Ethernet. Although this one has a serial port, which is pretty interesting to see. And it also has a USB 3 port, unlike my workstation, of course, which does not have USB 3. So that's pretty interesting to see. There's a lot of expansion slots, most of it PCI Express. There is one PCI at the bottom. And what's interesting is the power supply in this computer is actually on a card edge connector. And in fact, you can do this with the system closed. It's very difficult to do it with one hand. But I was just able to do it in my last take, so let's see if I can do it again here. But yes, you can pull out the power supply with, well, the case closed. So this is a 635 watt, 80 plus gold certified power supply with a card edge connector on it. So there's no connectors on the power supply. They're all on a little daughter board on the inside of the case, which I'll show once we actually open up the case, because you're not going to be able to see it without the flashlight on it, at the very least. I don't know how I'm going to get this in here with the cover on, but you should be able to. This is great for professionals, of course, who want to swap out power supply units on the fly. They don't want to take these systems out of the rack or whatever they're positioned into in their deployment, so that's pretty convenient. So, very bare bones system from the exterior. I do like the design. It does have handles on either side. They're opposite sides as well, so you can easily pack this thing around like an old Mac Pro or an old Power Mac, if you know what I'm talking about. I know a lot of people will. There are case badges for Windows 7 and Intel Xeon on the side of the case. So I figure let's go ahead and take the side panel off and take a look at the insides. Now, just like my HP XW6600 and a lot of these workstations, they have an easy handle which pops the side panel off, and there you can put the side panel off someplace else. So now we can explore the insides of the Precision T3600's motherboard and case, which is very empty. And I did not get this system with the video card, so this is just a temporary. I'll get into that here in a little bit as to what I'm temporarily using. Up here is the big baffle for the CPU's heatsink, which, as I mentioned, is a Xeon E5 2670 8-core running at 2.6 gigahertz. So it's got this ginormous heatsink on it. It's about as big as the ones you used to see on like Pentium Ds and like gateways and such. So that is one chunky heatsink. There's the fan to exhaust the hot air. And pretty much this motherboard has everything contained within the chipset, which has that large heatsink on it. So everything from the serial port to the USB to the sound, I believe. I don't know if the sound has its own dedicated IC, I'm not entirely sure, but everything pretty much, including the RAID for the integrated RAID on the motherboard, is contained in the chipset there, which is why the heatsink's so large. I'm going to find this easier to actually tilt this on its side, so I'm going to do that real quick. So as it turns out, there is actually a dedicated IC down there for the sound chip. I'm not even going to try to begin to read those numbers. There is actually a front panel connector header there, which snakes over to the front and gives you headphone and microphone jacks. And there's also a case intrusion switch header down there in case you wanted to install a case intrusion switch thingamajig there. If you were in like a school or another organization that takes theft pretty seriously, well, any kind of theft is pretty serious, but, you know, in case somebody was poking around in your computer, you know, you want to know if they took a piece of hardware out or even opened the side panel or something, you know, you want to know. And there's also the serial port controller down there and some kind of chip. I can't really read it, like I said, it's so small. A lot of these chips, as far as I can tell, there's very minimal markings on them. There's a little solder pad section here called No Deep. I'm not sure what that's supposed to mean. A lot of these I probably won't know what they stand for, so my apologies. I won't be able to give a real in-depth exploration, but a lot of chips here are just not really marked well, and I'm not going to bother looking up the data sheets for any of these. There's probably reasons why they're in here, but they wouldn't tell on a data sheet. Obviously the CR2032 battery is there. Auxiliary LED, HD LED, which is not even populated, and some kind of hard drive fan, which is not equipped on this because I believe you could have gotten a version of this which had extra hard drive bays, and I believe it could have been configured like a server, I guess. I'm not entirely sure, but as you can clearly see, there's a 5¼ inch bay there, and obviously the optical drive's underneath that. But I believe you could have gotten one of these with more hard drive bays, because there's a lot of SATA ports on the motherboard, although they're not really SATA ports. We'll get into that here in a second. And you could have actually had more hard drives in the system, and I believe that's what these two extra little surface mount sections are for. There could have been some kind of display there. I'm not sure what that would have been used for. Maybe BIOS codes or something. If you know that you were turning the system on and it was having an issue, you could look at the codes here and then look those up online. Although on this system in particular, it has the typical Dell 4 diagnostic LEDs on the front. So I don't know what the purpose of the display would be, but maybe somebody else could help me out with that. There is a connection for some kind of power remote. I'm not sure if that's Wake on LAN or something to that effect. I don't know what that would be used for. Maybe if you had like a dedicated gigabit LAN card in the PCI Express slots, you could have a 2-pin wire there that does Wake on LAN, I guess. You could technically set up one of those. I'm not sure. There's a hard drive temperature connector thing there. I believe that's some kind of sensor that would have been put in if you had more hard drives. That's my guess. There's a fan connector here, which there's actually 3 fans on the front panel, and they each are wired in individually, as you can see, to bring in air into the case. So if you had extra hard drives, which I believe would have went down here, they all have their own cooling solutions, which is very nice. Dell actually thought that out. So there's 3 separate fans which input or intake air, and then it all gets exhausted out. So, not too bad. Although I suppose you could probably add another case fan here if you were so fortunate enough to make one work. There is no dedicated screw holes for a fan in this back plate. That's just a vent at the moment. And interestingly, USB FP has the USB 3 header on it. So if anybody's ever gotten a case and you had a USB 3 header that looks just like this, well, that's USB 3. I don't know why the header is all the way over here. That's just weird, but either way, that USB port does work. It is USB 3. It's just weird that I see the connector for it way over here on the motherboard. I'm gonna get this reconnected real quick. Alright, so let's go ahead and take off this little piece of plastic here, and let's take a look down here. Now there's some other connectors too, like that's the front panel thing, which also has the USB 2.0 ports in it. There's some kind of other USB thing, I'm guessing for a card reader if this one were to be equipped with it, but obviously as you can tell there's nothing there on the front that has a card reader in it, so obviously it's not populated. And there's some kind of C1425, I'm not sure if that's that little thing down there, that little surface mount job component or what, I'm not sure. Anyway, as you might be able to tell, there are a lot of SATA connectors. However, as you'll see on the labels, they are labeled as HDD0 through HDD3, and then there's SATA 0 and SATA 1. I believe those 4 HDD dedicated ports are if you had the extra hard drives on a different version of this, and those are actually SAS. They're not SATA. They are actually shown up in the BIOS as SAS. So make sure that if you get one of these systems, you don't try to leave the hard drive connected to one of those HDD ports. Otherwise, Windows will not pick up the hard drive. Holy f***. I've never had a V6 car which shook the f***ing house. Oh my god. Anyway, otherwise Windows will not install. So that's definitely something you're going to have to keep in mind. So I had to move the hard drive from one of these SAS ports over to the SATA port, and then it would actually install Windows. So that's something I did not know. And as far as I know, there is a way to make that work. You can actually find a driver file that you can put into your Windows USB or put in as a flash drive when you're booting a Windows DVD or something, and then you could easily, install that little driver file and install Windows, but you just will plug it into the SATA thing. That's just, why do they even bother with that? But yeah, I suppose these are for connecting up drives as SAS, and you get extra performance out of them, and they're on a dedicated controller, something or another to that effect. Now this little connector is the bane of my existence, and the reason why I say this is because this is the reason why I cannot pop in my gaming graphics card right now. See, these Dell systems, they could have been ordered with a nice high-end professional graphics card, as these Dell Precisions were probably ordered with. Thus, to get extra power, obviously there had been a breakout cable here, which looks like the one you'd see on PCI Express, and maybe it is a standard PCI Express 8-pin power thing, but the thing is, you have to have a special breakout cable, because of course Dell OEM systems, you had to have a breakout cable to break out that 8-pin to two 6-pin male connectors, so that way you could plug in your graphics card, which is very annoying. This system should have had that when I got it. I don't know why it didn't come with one, but I guess because there's no graphics card, they did not have that. And maybe this thing could have been configured as a server that booted over the network, and thus it was remotely managed, and that's certainly a possibility as to why there's no graphics card in this thing. When I got it, it could have just been simply used as a server and just remote desktoped into whenever somebody needed to do something with it. So that's certainly a possibility, and they just never put in the dongle, but some of these did have the high-end graphics cards in them, and thus that would have been used. So I ordered a cable off of eBay, and it's going to be coming in here late next week. By the time you're watching this, it'll probably obviously be like less than a week before this cable comes in, and then I can finally install my graphics card into a PCI Express slot and take out this piece of crap NVIDIA card that I'm currently using just to get video out. So, a minor annoyance, but it's certainly not the end of the world. I've certainly had a lot worse happen, so this is nothing. I figure before anything else, I'll explain how much RAM this thing has. This has 4 ECC DDR3 RAM slots. Yes, this has to take ECC memory because this is an Intel Xeon based computer, which means that RAM is dirt cheap for these things. Now this system, as far as I've read online, can take up to 64 gigs of RAM. It has 8 gigs currently installed, which was probably what it shipped with when it was new. Either that, or is that what it was, or that might have been what it came with when I got it, or what the previous people actually configured this with. I actually bought this from some kind of PC parts and server thing off eBay, which had pretty good feedback. And as a matter of fact, actually, if you didn't watch the live stream, let me just show you this real quick. It came like this. It actually shipped in solid foam. Like, they actually kind of like molded this, like form-fitted it to the computer. I've never seen a computer packaged this way, but I guess when you're dealing with a machine which is as large as this is and has a unique case design, it'd be best to pack it in solid foam like that. I mean, that was really amazing, and it was like really tight to the box, so it was like all the way up to the corners. It was very well packaged and very difficult to get out of the box, but I like it when that's that way because then it means you get a system in one piece, and not even the wraths of FedEx destroy the system. So I definitely gotta have props to the eBay distributors, I'm gonna just say distributor at this point, for doing that, because, well, the system arrived in functional order, as it should have, because I paid for it, of course. I don't know if this motherboard actually supports PCI Express, like SLI sort of stuff going on here, because there are technically 2 full-size, full bandwidth PCI Express X16 slots. As you can see, there's one up here which has got the graphics card in it, which says 75 watts plus external 225 watt. There's also one down here. So my guess is, if you really wanted to, if you didn't want to have, or if you had something up here, like for example my Wi-Fi card is up here, technically you could have your graphics card in either one of these slots and still have the full power of the PCI Express slot for graphics cards. I believe that's what this is for. There's no SLI, it's just one or the other, or you could have 2 low-powered graphics cards in there, or maybe one high-powered and one low-powered, and then you could have more monitor outputs. I'm not sure, but I put my Wi-Fi card up here because I was going to put my graphics card here, which would block the X1 slot, but I might just change my mind later. I might just move this to the X1 slot right here, and then put my graphics card in this one down here, and then I can have another graphics card up here if I so chose to. A low-powered one, for example, it just used 75 watts, but I'm not sure if when you use one of these slots, it disables the other. I'm not too sure about that. It's really not the end of the world. I don't intend on doing multiple graphics cards in this system anyway. It's just something I noticed, so I don't know. But anyway, I'm not going to bother turning the system on in this video. My software configuration for this computer is not quite finished yet, and I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to do. Now, the BIOS on this system actually mentions UEFI support, and I might tinker around with that in a little bit off camera. And I'm also not sure if I'm going to stick a solid-state drive in this computer. I thought about it because I've retired the 2010 MacBook, and that has a 128 gig SSD in it, and thus I'm not going to have a use for it. So I almost thought about just pulling the SSD out of that computer, and then I'm going to probably put it into this, and then do a UEFI version of Windows installation onto the SSD. So I thought about doing that off camera, of course. I'm not going to live stream that because y'all see Windows installations all the time. There's no point in showing it. But I don't know. That might be something I'll look into. It came with this 500 gig Toshiba hard drive. I'm not a real big fan of Toshiba hard drives, but hey, it works. It came with the computer, and it's, well, functional. It doesn't have any errors, and it's been cleanly formatted, and it's an AF drive, so yeah, it's alright. Gets the job done. Not my favorite, but neither a Seagate drive, which ship with a lot of computers, so I don't know. I do intend on giving this thing a good cleaning, though. It is quite dusty inside and outside, so I'm probably going to look into that. But, in a nutshell, this is my new workstation. It's a work in progress, but eventually this thing is going to replace, well, it probably already has, but I say that just as a placeholder. It'll soon replace the aging HP XW6600, which, as you can see, is sitting out here. I brought it out here because I needed to pull the graphics card out of it, and this thing has such a hodgepodge setup with my Radeon card that, yeah, it's just easier to work out here when there's more room and there's a lot more light. So, yeah. But this one, I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I might sell it locally. I might find another use for it. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it yet. This has the maximum CPUs, the Xeon E5450s in it, and it doesn't have the maximum amount of memory. It has 10 gigs in it, not 32. This thing maxes out at 32 gigs, which is still quite a lot of memory, but, you know. But it's ECC DDR2, and this system was really starting to show its age, as I cannot run VMware Workstation Pro 14 on it, which is very annoying. I don't know why, but it just would not run properly. It would install, but you couldn't do anything because it said the CPUs were incompatible, so that was quite a pain in the nuts. So, unfortunately, I've had to deem this machine, well, unusable in that sense for my daily work, because it's just starting to show its age. It's still useful in many other aspects, of course, so I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet. I'm probably going to sell it because after buying this new workstation, I need to recoup some of my money, because even though I did get this at a pretty decent discount, about 14% off, I suppose, the already discounted price that it was being sold for, it is still a $260 workstation, so that is quite a bit of money to be spending on something with Sandy Bridge in it, but it isn't all that bad, and this will be a much better system to play games on than the other one. And even though I could have technically bought an Optiplex, which had a newer generation CPU in it for the same price, this just would work out a lot better in the end, given the Xeon, and, well, it just has 8 cores already to begin with, whereas a Core i7 would have only had a quad-core system, or a quad-core processor in it. But I don't know, I guess beggars can't be choosers. I got what I got, I'll make it work. So, I don't know, I guess that's it for this video, guys. Like I said, I'm not going to bother turning this on because the software load is still in progress, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet. I'll determine that all off camera, of course. But, in the meantime, I figure I'd show it off in a better video just because I know the live stream didn't do it justice, and I didn't even turn it on the live stream, but there's no point in turning it on here because there's not really much to show. Windows is basically just a fresh, clean installation, so it's very boring, so no real point in thinking around with that. So anyway, I'm going to stop blabbing. I'm going to turn the camera off. So I appreciate you all coming to watch this video. Do expect some more videos on the Precision going into the future with my little project build when I get the little cable in to allow me to plug in my powered graphics card. We'll obviously do a video on that. But until then, that's it. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all later.